Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another installment of our Shiurim on Pesach. And tonight's Shiur is called the Seder Night, Free at Last. Free at last because we know that the night of the Seder is the night of Cherus, of freedom, as the Sefer HaChinuch writes so beautifully in his words. Many of the mitzvahs that we do in the night of the Seder is in order that we should be, as he writes, because we want to enter into our hearts, that in this time, Hashem Yisbarach Ma'avdus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he redeemed us from slavery. V'nasenu b'nei chorin, he made us free people. V'zachinu l'malchus u'legedula, we became like nobility and gedula, greatness. And that's, he writes, throughout all the mitzvahs that we have in the Seder night. So many of them are to remind us that we are b'nei chorin, we are free. We lean to the left. We wear our finest garbs. We put the most beautiful kalim vessels on the table, all to remind us that we are b'nei chorin. It's the night that we went free from Mitzrayim. We're no longer slaves to Paro. We are free men to do that which we would like. And it brings us to a very basic question on the entire holiday of Pesach, and specifically on the night of the Seder itself. The Vilna Gaon, when he counts up all of the mitzvahs that we have on the night of the Seder, if a person will follow closely all of the deraisa, all the biblical obligations, and all the derabbanan, all the rabbinical obligations, we will find that there are no less than 64 mitzvahs that a person does on the night of the Seder. Besides the 64 mitzvahs on the night of the Seder, why don't we think to ourselves of all of the build-up? We know the Gemara tells us, Shloishim Yom Kaidem Achag, 30 days before the festival, you have to begin learning all of the halachas, all of the laws of that festival. And where do we learn it from? From Pesach. Because there are hundreds and hundreds of details, of halachas, of laws, of mitzvahs that have to be done before we even get to Pesach. How about making the matzah, all the details of making the matzah, cleaning our homes, kashering all of the vessels, our kitchen. It takes hours and weeks of work and preparation to do. And then when we get to the Yom Tov itself, there's 64 mitzvahs on the night of the Seder. But there are so many other laws and details and nuances, minutiae of the halacha, that if a person has not spent the last month studying the laws clearly, it's almost impossible that they will be able to keep the Yom Tov of Pesach in the right way. So it is a night that we are known to be b'nei chorin. We are free people. It is a night that we commemorate the Geula, the redemption of the Jewish people from Mitzrayim. It's a night that we sit at the table and we are nobility. We're the Mamleches Kohanim Goy Kadosh. We are the holy nation of Kohanim, of the high priests of the Jewish people that are sitting there as we entreat ourselves to the tale of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. We learn what it means to have been slaves, and we learn what it means to be set free. And yet if a person thinks about it clearly, we will begin to realize that this that we are calling Cherus, freedom, which in our vernacular means you are free to do what you would like to do. Go where you want, talk how you want, eat how you want, sleep how you want. Everything is whatever you want. That's what we would call in the world today. That is freedom. This is the generation that it's so many freedoms for everything. And yet it's very clear from this Yom Tov of Pesach, which is the center, the prime example of what it means to be a Jew. Because our whole story emanates from the Gullus, from the exile, and it crescendos with the Geula, with the redemption. The entire story of the Seder is a nation that was taken and lifted out of the impurities of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, and we were brought into the world of mitzvahs of keeping the guard and the command of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Now, how is a person considered to be a Ben Chor and free? If on the night that celebrates our freedom, you're busy doing 64 different mitzvahs and you don't really have a choice. You have to do it if you want to fulfill your observance on the night of the Seder. How is a person who is free have to spend so much time and so much energy, not to mention so much money, to make sure that everything that is going on the Seder night and the entire 8 days of Pesach, how can we ensure that everything is kosher v'yasher 100%, the way that Hashem wants? How can we be free if we are totally absorbed in doing the commands of Hashem? Where's my freedom? Where is my identity? Where is my freedom of expression so that I could just liberate myself and express myself? Where does that exist? The Torah is telling us, seemingly, that it doesn't exist. If you want to be a member of Klal Yisrael, you want to be a card-carrying member of the Mamleches Kohanim of the great treasured nation, and you want to be able to celebrate the Yom Tov of Pesach in the right way, so the Torah is telling us, well, there's only one way to do it. First of all, 30 days before the Yom Tov, you better start preparing very good. And you better learn those halachas inside and out. In the Mishnah Berurah, which is the laws of daily living, so most holidays are within, there's several holidays that are grouped together in each krach, in each section of the Mishnah Berurah. There's 6 sections altogether. In most sections, you have several holidays that fall in each one. Pesach has a krach, has a section all into itself. There are hundreds of pages of the laws, of the minutiae of everything. And if you don't know it, how are you going to keep Pesach properly? Maybe you'll end up eating chametz, God forbid. Maybe you didn't wash your dishes in the right way. Maybe you thought that if you clean the sink in this way, that's good enough. Maybe it's really not. Maybe you bought matzah, but you didn't buy the right kind of matzah because it's really matzah that's not going to fulfill the mitzvah of eating on the night of the Seder. But what's wrong? The matzah looks very good. How do you know? So how can a person be considered free with the liberation of ourselves, of our souls, of our nation, which took place at the Seder, took place in Mitzrayim, in Egypt itself? How can we be free when we are obligated to keep so many details and mitzvahs that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands us to do? And if we don't do it, then we simply have not fulfilled our obligation on the night of the Seder, on the Yom Tov of Pesach, in the eating of the matzah, in the reclining to the left. That's free. You ever see a person sit by the Seder? In the olden days, they had couches. They had like beds that they would sit on. So they would lean to the left and they would eat their food, and it was comfortable to eat that way. You ever see modern day freedom? Sitting on a chair like this, and you're eating like this. Is that freedom? And yet we tell ourselves, yes, I'm free tonight. Look at my table. Look at all my fancy china, my crystal. Look at how free I am. Where's your freedom? You have a certain time you have to eat the matzah by. You can't even dilly-dally at all during the meal. You talk and you talk and you talk and you tell the story, and finally you get to the seudah, to the meal, and you look at quick, we have to eat quick. We have 10 minutes to eat. That's freedom. You have to shovel the roast into your mouth. You have to eat the soup and lap it up as fast as you possibly can. There's no time for dessert, nothing. And then when the meal's over, says the halacha, no more eating for the rest of the night. But I'm hungry. No. The last thing in your mouth is a taste of the afikomen. That's it. Yeah, but I'd like a piece of chocolate cake. Not tonight. You can't have that. Yeah, but I'm free. No, you're really not. How is a person free throughout the Yom Tov of Pesach? The Sefer HaChinuch writes that if you look at the laws of Pesach, the laws of Matzah, the laws of the Korban Pesach, of the sacrifice, we don't bring it today, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but one day, Be'ez Hashem, we will again. He brings down the following message to his child who he's writing this Sefer, this book to. And he says, Ve'ata b'ni, and now my child, im bina shama zais. If you'll use your understanding, listen carefully to what it is that I have to say. V'hata aznecha v'shama, tilt your ear and listen. Alamencha lahayil b'tayru v'mitzvahs, I'm going to teach you something that will elevate you and raise you up in the world of Torah and of mitzvahs. And he says like this, Daki Adam Nifal Kefi Pu'ulaisav, you should know that a person is Nifal, they become who they are based upon the actions that they do. V'libai v'kol machshavaisav, and his heart and one's mind, his thoughts, Tamid Acha Maisav Shu'aise, are always being drawn after the actions that you are involved in by him. Im toiv ve'im ra, whether you're doing good or whether you are doing bad. Whatever activities a person is involved in their life, wherever they are running, wherever they are going, whatever they are spending their time on, says the Sefer HaChinuch, you should know that your thoughts and your heart is going to be drawn after those actions that you are doing. And he goes on to say a fascinating thing. And he says that even if a person was a Rasha Gomer, they were completely a wicked person, and they were involved in who knows what terrible things in their life. However, one day they wake up and they say, you know what, let me just go help the old lady across the street. I'm in the mood to do a good deed today. And they start with that one kind deed. It awakens something inside of them. We'll see shortly what that is. It awakens something inside of them. And that one kind deed, that one act of goodness will lead to another one. And says the Sefer HaChinuch before long, with all the deeds that he's doing, he will wipe away his Yetzer Hara, the inclination. Like we said, after one's actions, your heart is going to be drawn. And therefore, the one who was the biggest Rasha, the most wicked person in the world, after a certain amount of time, he converts himself and he turns his life around and he becomes one of the greatest tzaddikim. He can become a man and a woman of righteousness. Because the actions that you do will draw the heart out. It'll draw the thoughts out, and you will have a desire to do more and more good. On the other hand, you can have a person who is a tzaddik gomer, such a righteous individual, and they're going along minding their own business, they're learning, they're davening, they're doing chesed, they're giving tzedakah, wonderful person. And then one day they get caught up in an avera, in a sin, and they made a mistake. But their ma'asav, their actions now is going to be nifal, is defining for who they are. And one mistake will lead to another. And then this person that was so lofty and so high up there, who couldn't control their thoughts and their heart from being drawn after the actions of their body, unfortunately, what takes place? They end up going down, and they could become a Rasha Gomer, a totally wicked person as a result. Ki yedua hadavar, because it is known, says the Sefer HaChinuch, the emes, it's true. I'm telling you the truth, my dear son, he says. Shekol Adam nifal kefi pu'uloisav, every single person is defined, and they become who they are based upon their actions. Like I have said many times to you already. This is a powerful statement of the Sefer HaChinuch, and it is an idea that he spans throughout his commentary. And he writes over here, that is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us a plethora of mitzvahs, 613. Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezaka es Yisrael. Hashem wanted to benefit the Jewish people. Lefikach, therefore, here b'lem Torah mitzvahs, he increased. We need 613. We'd be happy with 5. Give me the big 10. That would be enough. Why did HaKadosh Baruch have to burden us with 613 mitzvahs? Says the Sefer HaChinuch, it's not a burden. Chas v'chalila, don't look at them as a burden. Don't think that they're getting in your way. On the other hand, kedei lahatfis ben kol machshavaseinu liyos ben kol askeinu, because we want our thoughts to be absorbed in the world of Hashem. We want our actions to be developing in the world of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lehetiv lanu b'achriseinu, so that we should be the beneficiaries of the good in the end of our lives, when there will be a place called Olam Haba, the world to come. Ki mitocha pu'ulois, because through the actions that a person does, hatoivos, the good actions, anachnu nif'olim yostoivim, we become good. You do good, you will become good. V'zoichem l'chayad, and you will merit a beautiful portion in the world to come. Says the Sefer Chinuch, you are not what you eat. You are not what you think. You are what you do with your life. And the more that a person is engaged in activities that are positive, that are good, that are wholesome, that are pure, that are holy, then the person becomes an elevated being in this world. They become someone who is in control, someone that extends beyond the nature of this world, which is trying to pull him down. And he becomes the tzaddik gomor, he becomes the truly righteous individual. And therefore, Adam nifal lefi pu'uloisav, a person is defined, it's who they become, based upon the actions that they do. And this is the beginning of our understanding of the cherus, of the freedom that we have in Pesach. There is no other Yom Tov that has as many halachas, laws. No other Yom Tov that has as many details. There is no other Yom Tov that commands us as you are sitting by the table. There's no other Yom Tov that has a Seder. What kind of religion is this where you have to sit at the table hours on end celebrating freedom, and you got to go by the script that it says over there, and you have to do everything that it says to make sure you do it right? Says the Sefer Chinuch, that's exactly what our religion is. It's the religion that trains us to be good. How are we trained to be good? By doing good. The more that your actions reflect godliness, the more that your thoughts will be in tune and in line with that. The more that you go in the ways of the Ribbono Shel Olam, and you see all the numerous mitzvahs that he has given us, because that is the way that we're going to be elevated, like he says in the beginning. Listen carefully, my son, and I will give you a piece of information. It is the secret to spiritual growth in this world, and that is, let your body, let your actions and your activities draw your mind and your heart and your soul into the right direction. If you will do that, then you will be the person that is free. Because instead of the body dragging your mind and your heart and your soul in the wrong direction, it's only this way or that way. Then you have claimed your freedom as a Ben Chorin, as a person that has gone out of the shackles of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. The Yetzer Hara doesn't have control over you. Rather, your body is a vessel that is here to do the will and the bidding of the Ribbono Shel Olam, and that is the greatest freedom that a person could have. The Panovitcher Rav, the great Panovitcher Rav of Yosef Shlomo Kahanim, was once giving what's called a Shir Klali, which is a Gemara Shir to the entire yeshiva. And there were about 200 boys learning in Panovitch at this time. And he, if anybody ever saw pictures, anybody ever saw him, he was a person who was filled with life and the fires of Torah. And when he would give a shir, apparently he would come so animated and so alive that everybody was drawn. They were fixated on the Rav as he was giving his shir. As he's giving the shir, in the middle, suddenly a taxi driver walks into the Beis Midrash. Panovitcher Rav is up there darshaning, giving away difficult concepts in the Gemara. And a taxi driver walks in to the Beis Midrash, right up to the Panovitcher Rav in the middle of the shir. And he asked the Panovitcher Rav, can he tell him something? Panovitcher Rav bends down his ear and he listens. And the Rav smiles at him, says a few words, and the man walks away. And he goes right back to teaching. All the Bachrim are sitting there in the shul. What is going on over here? A few minutes later, the taxi driver walks back in. And he walks straight up to the Panovich Rav in the middle of a Gemara shir. And he says something into the Panovich Rav's ear once again. And this time the Panovich Rav thinks for about a minute. And after that minute is over, he looks at the taxi driver in a very animated way. He says over something to him. And the driver walks out. And then for the next 15 minutes, the Rav goes back into the shir, pounding away on the Gemara, the Rishonim, everything. At the end of the shir, the Bachrim come and they start the way that it works in yeshiva. You start attacking the Rosh Yeshiva with all of your questions. You want to know what he's talking about. How can he say this and that? And he's deflecting each one by one. Until the last Bachar, he answers his question also. And now he's ready to leave. One Bachar, one yeshiva boy comes over and he says, Rosh Yeshiva, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what was that back and forth between the Rosh Yeshiva and that taxi driver? So the Panovich Rav leans back and he says, I'll tell you. And at this point, all the boys are huddling around. And he says, today, as I walked into the yeshiva before I was about to give my shir, I was informed by the office that we only have enough money to be able to feed the yeshiva today. Starting tomorrow, we have no idea where the money is going to come from, and I have no idea how I'm going to feed all of you. And this was the word that I received as I was walking towards the Beis Midrash to come and give this shir. You can imagine the stress that is on my mind, thinking about all of you young men. How are we going to take care of you? In the middle of the shir, that taxi driver walked in. He was taking around town here in Bnei Brak a very wealthy philanthropist, it seems from America, who came with a lot of money to Eretz Yisrael, and he wanted to donate handsomely to different organizations. And he drove up to the Panovich Yeshiva, our yeshiva, and he wanted to speak to me. So the driver got out of the car, and he asked where I could be found, and they said he's in the Beis Midrash giving a shir. So he came over to me in the middle of the shir, and he asked me, would I mind stopping the shir because there's a very wealthy man who would like to write a nice check to the yeshiva. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the middle of giving a shir, but we have no money in the account. How am I going to feed you tomorrow? And I said to myself, no. It's the Yetzer Hara trying to stop me from learning and teaching right now. And I told the driver, you know what? Tell him to come back in a half an hour. I'll be available then. He went back to the rich man, and the rich man was very upset. You don't make someone like that wait a half an hour. And he tells him, tell the Rav, either he meets with me now, or I'm not going to give him a penny. So he came back and he told me, the man said that if you don't meet with him right now, he's not going to give you a single penny. So I realized, and that's why it took me longer, I'm desperate for money. But then I thought to myself, look how much the Yetzer Hara is working to get me to stop teaching Torah right now to my yeshiva. And so I told him emphatically, you cannot build Torah through bittul Torah, through canceling out the learning of Torah. I'm not going to meet with him right now. The driver went back and told the rich man what the Panovich Rav said, and he was very upset. And they sped off, they drove away. However, as he went around town to different institutions and organizations and yeshivas, the one that made the greatest impression on him was the Panovich Rav, his midah, his attribute of truth, of emes, that he was not willing to bend for the request of the rich man over there. And that day later on, he came driving back to the Panovich Yeshiva, and he had a meeting with the Panovich Rav on the Rav's time. And he wrote him a very large check that covered a significant part of the budget for that yeshiva. Says the Sefer Achinoch, Adam nifol al pipulosov, a person is going to be defined based on their actions. If you do good, you will become good. Thinking alone is not enough. You've got to do. And that's why the Rebbeinu Shem has given us so many mitzvahs. And the night of the Seder, where we are emerging after the entirety of the night as Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, we have to recognize that what defines us, what makes us who we are, is that we are the nation that bears the torch. We bear the banner of Torah and of mitzvahs, of our actions being in line with the Ratzon Hashem. The Vilna Gaon writes in his commentary on Mishlei, the pasuk says, "V'hine abiya lechem ruchi," I will express my spirit to you. And the Vilna Gaon begins to explain to us the deeper mechanisms of how these things work. And he says the following. He says, everything that a person does, we're in the world of a sea of action once again. You bring down a ruach, a spirit of whatever that spirit might be from above. And it will help you. It will give you the energy and the wherewithal to do more actions in line with what you have just done. And that spirit, that essence that you are bringing into this world will not rest, will not be quiet, until it does more actions that you just activated in itself. Now listen what he writes over here. And then the person's spirit derives pleasure from whatever he is doing, and he gets what's called nachas ruach, spiritual delight and pleasure. Now listen to what the Vilna Gaon says at this point. Hein b'dvar mitzvah, whether you're doing a mitzvah, hein b'dvar avera, whether you're doing an avera. And he writes, it says in Pirkei Avos, avera goyreres avera, one avera breeds another avera, another sin. Mitzvah goyreres mitzvah, and one mitzvah will breed and bring about another mitzvah. V'kol dvar avera shigedoylo, the greater that the avera, that the sin is. Gam haruach habo mimenehi gedoylo, the spirit that you create as a result of it is bigger as well. And you have a bigger desire to do another avera. So too if you do a great mitzvah. You bring down this spiritual force from a very high, lofty, holy place. And then that ruach, that spiritual force, desires more mitzvahs. And has such a pleasure. It enjoys so much being engaged in more mitzvahs in one's life. Says the Vilna Gaon. But he continues, and I'll continue. You should know the pleasure that the spiritual powers that you have inside of you derived from kedusha, from holiness, is much greater than the ruach hatuma, than the spirit of impurity that you have inside of you. Because spiritual delight, spiritual pleasure, kedusha, holiness, tahara, purity, that is actual, real pleasure that a person is going to have in their life. The more mitzvahs that a person does, the more you become a sponge for mitzvahs. The bigger the mitzvah, the greater the detail, the more that you are involved, your neshama begins to soar, and there's a nachas ruach, there's a pleasure that you are deriving at that moment, and you want more and more and more. Like the Maharal says, nefesh lo simale, the nefesh will never be satisfied. You give it a little bit of ruchnius, it wants more. You give it one mitzvah, mitzvah goreres mitzvah, one will bring about the other. It can't stop itself. It's an insatiable appetite for the schus, for the merit, to be engaged in the practice of mitzvahs. How do we do it? You have to be involved in the physical world of mitzvahs. And when a person begins doing that, and their body's moving in the right direction, says the Vilna Gaon, do you think it's just a body, just a physical body? No. There are ruchnias, there are spiritual pinings that are going on underneath the layers behind the scenes that's infusing you with such a burning desire to do another one, another one, another one. That is, in fact, how a person ends up traveling in the world of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his Torah and his mitzvahs. And that is the way that a person occupies their time with Kedusha, with holiness, with goodness. On the other hand, if a person will get involved in Averas, in sins, they create a Ruach Hatuma, a spirit of impurity. And it's also hungry. It also wants more. It's also looking around, searching around the world. What else can I get my hands on? And then it also has an insatiable appetite to drag yourself into more sin and more impurity and more problems. And therefore, says the Vilna Gaon, be smart. You want to know what to do with yourself. You want to know which direction to go in. You want to know how to occupy your time. It's very simple. Get involved in the Ruach HaKedusha, the spirit of holiness and purity, because with that, you will become a person who walks around with tranquility, with nachas ruach, with pleasure. You will shine, you will be happy, you will be at peace with yourself. You will be free. Because your body will not be shackles holding you down to the tumah, to the impurities of this world. Your mind will not be racing, trying to figure out what's the next avera that you could do and pull yourself farther away from Hashem. Your thoughts and your actions and your body will not be moving and going to the wrong places. No. You have freed yourself up from all of that because you begin to understand that what is the tachlis, what is the purpose of life? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu put me here? He wants me to have nachas ruach. He wants me to have pleasure, peace, tranquility, happiness, warmth, spiritual warmth inside of myself. Where does it come from? It comes from you. If you will occupy your time with doing the things that will awaken this ruach of kedusha above, then you will be drawn after it. And the Rabbeinu Yoina writes on this Mishnah over here of mitzvah goreres mitzvah. He says the following words. He says, Ki ba'asais ha'adam mitzvah ketana pamachas. If you even do one small little mitzvah, one time, hu miskarev es Hashem yisbarach, you bring yourself closer to Hashem. Umargil es ruchay lavoidasai, and you're training your ruach, your spirit, your neshama, you're training it to be involved in avoidasai, in the service of God. And then it becomes easy in your eyes to do another mitzvah. Even if it's more difficult, do one little mitzvah. The next one's bigger. But you say to yourself, look how good I feel after the first one. Look how infused I am with nachas ruach, with pleasure after the first one. And now it's small. Imagine if I do a bigger mitzvah. Imagine how much better I'm going to feel. Imagine how much kedusha I'm going to unleash from the heavens onto me. Imagine how much more I'm going to grow in the direction of elevating myself in the eyes of Hashem. And therefore, even though the next one is harder, it's easier to do. Because the ruach, that spirit that's inside you, it's drawing you already in that direction. And he writes, once you're training yourself to do mitzvahs, you do a second one, you do a third one, even if it's hard work. This great desire and this great drive that you now have, it is upon you, and it is a driving force in your life. It's going to be occupying your mind. And then you will come to do all of the mitzvahs. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, the similar idea to the Vilna Gaon, and that is that if a person will begin to elevate themselves, they will recognize why we are here in this world, to be free, truly free. There is two choices a person has in life: ruach hakedusha, spirit of holiness, or ruach atuma, the spirit of impurity. Says the Sefer Chinuch, you could be the worst person in the world, but you begin to train yourself in the world of mitzvahs. You're seeped in Tumah. Think about Klal Yisrael. They were on the 49th level of impurity of Tumah. The Haggadah itself says 1 second more, that's it. They would have sunk in forever. We never hear from them again. And suddenly, through the experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim, through all the mitzvahs of preparing for the first Seder which took place there in Egypt, the baking of the matzahs, the shechting of the Korban Pesach, the roasting, the eating, the reclining, the drinking of the 4 cups of wine, all of that, they began to go out of their impurity and they brought the holiness of the mitzvahs of the world of Avodas Hashem onto themselves. And it went for 49 days like that until they were willing and they were ready and they were able and they were worthy of standing by the foot of Har Sinai and receiving the greatest gift of all, the Torah, which is filled with all of the mitzvahs of Hashem to draw our body and our soul and our mind and our hearts all into the right direction. The night of the Seder is not a night, chas v'chalila, of slavery. The night of the Seder is not a night where we're being oppressed, God forbid. It's not a night where we are being burdened. There's a burden on top of us of every single detail, 64 mitzvahs that we are obligated to keep on the night of the Seder. On the other hand, the night of the Seder teaches us what it means to be a Jew. The night of the Seder is the night that we elevate ourselves above the world. And we bring the Ruach of Kedusha, the spirit of purity upon ourselves, and we go forward in life to be a nation of people that are in love with Kedusha, with holiness, with purity, a nation of people whose hearts and minds and souls are drawn after good. We are a nation of people who appreciate the gift of Torah, of mitzvahs, of halacha, of details that HaKadosh Baruch has given us. Because when we get to that point, then we transform ourselves. On the night of the Seder, we walk away different people. We're people that are just reveling in the nachas ruach, in the spirit of kedusha, of holiness, of pleasantness that HaKadosh Baruch has given us. The Ramchal writes in the Mesilas Yesharim along these lines as well, that we know that it's not easy to get the body to move. It's not easy to get out of, especially after 1 year of coronavirus. It's not easy to get out of the house. It's not easy to put on your clothes. How many people, I don't know if they even got dressed in the last year officially because you don't have to. How difficult it is to move forward right now in life. And our bodies have natural inertia. Our bodies are made from Adama. Adam Arishon, the first man, is called Adam because he comes from Adama, dirt. Dirt doesn't move. Dirt doesn't jump around. Dirt doesn't go running for 5 miles or to run a marathon. Dirt just stays on the ground where it is. So how is a neshama going to come into our bodies? The body which is simply dirt and it's immersed in the ground. How is the neshama going to capitalize on all of the mitzvahs that the Torah gives us? So the Ramchal writes, Eitzah Toiva. Let me give you a piece of advice, he says. She is dares beritzaynai. You should be misdares. You should awaken yourself by in the ratzon and doing the will of Hashem. Kidei sheyimashech mizeh, and then it will be born out from such an activity. Shetivolei boy hachemda beteva, that suddenly you'll have a desire to keep pushing forward and doing the will of Hashem. Ki atenua chitzoina, because the physical actions that a person does, ma'oreres hapinimius, awakens and arouses and enlightens the penimius, the inner workings of one's neshama, of one's soul. Says the Ramchal, the same idea, that we are given plethora of mitzvahs. Why? Because the body we have a little bit of control over this earthy body that we have. And if we push ourselves to keep doing and doing and doing, and we lift ourselves up off the ground, and we get involved with one mitzvah after the other, give tzedakah, do a chesed, take a siddur in your hands, daven to the Rebbeinu Shalom, do the mitzvah that's Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, the greatest mitzvah of all learning Torah, open up a sefer, listen to a shir online, do something to move your body in the right direction. Says the Ramchal, as distant as the body is from moving in the right direction, sometimes the power that you have over the body, it's all that you have. And if you will just lift yourselves up off the ground, and you will start doing actions, even if inside, not so motivated, inside, it's a dreary day. It rained today in Los Angeles. Rainy days are so depressing in Los Angeles. We're not used to water on our car. People don't know how to drive. They're driving 12 miles an hour down the freeway because of the rain. It's such a rough day over here today. Nevertheless, says the Ramchal, forget about what's on the inside. Forget about whether you're awakened in the inside. If you woke on the inside with mitzvahs, forget about all of that, says Hashem. Rather, what should you look at? Just start moving your body in the right directions. Conquer the inertia. If you conquer the inertia and you begin getting involved in the mitzvahs, you know what's going to happen to you? Says the Ramchal, certainly you are going to awaken that spirit of Kedusha that is inside of you, and you're going to have this insatiable desire to do more and more mitzvahs in your life. And that's what he says, the chitzonius, the outward physical actions that a person does, it is ma'ira, it awakens and arouses and inspires the penimius, that which is inside. The same idea. Says the Sefer Chinuch, that means you are nifal, you are defined based on your actions because you bring yourself to life. Says the Vilna Gaon, there's a ruach of Kedusha that is waiting to give you nachas, pleasure. But you got to do the actions. And when you do the actions, you bring all this upon yourself. You become a different person. You're thinking day and night, how can I do this mitzvah? I want to do this. I want to do this chesed. I want to be involved with this over here. I want to go learn another shit. I want. When a person is living on that, kisivale ba'asimcha penimis, then you will have born inside of you inner happiness and joy. Va'achefetz va'achemda, and there will be a desire and a yearning mikoyach ma shehu mislaihet betnuasai beratzai, from the flames of the actions that you did in this world. You activate inside of yourself true joy and happiness. At the end of a long night of the Seder, we better have smiles on our face. Because on the night of the Seder is when we are truly recognizing and really realizing in our lives, perhaps the first time this year, what it means to be a Jew. What it means to be a Jew is to direct your thoughts and your heart and your soul in a good, positive direction. What is good? Whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us to do. And that's why he gave us 613 mitzvahs. Because those mitzvahs, they fill us up with goodness. They open up, they pique the interest of the neshama in this world to continue moving and going forward, to be miskarev, to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You bring down this ruach, this spirit of Kedusha, which illuminates your life. You see the world in a different way. And you have nachas ruach. You have pleasure, you have happiness, You have internal fulfillment, internal fulfillment inside of you. We call it sipuk hanefesh, when the soul is satisfied. The soul is satisfied when it is doing the right things. We have to train the body to go in the right direction. And then you'll walk around so pleasantly happy with everything that HaKadosh Baruch has done. And that's the secret of Pesach. And that is the cherus, the freedom that we are trying to achieve. And at the end of the Magid, the end of retelling the story, it says, B'chol dor vador, in every single generation, that's our generation. After a year of COVID, in our generation, Chayiv Adam Leroy says Atzmai. A person is obligated to see themselves Ke'ilu hu yotzim min Mitzrayim, as if he himself has exited from Egypt. Every person on the night of the Seder, by the time we get to the end of telling over all of the fascinating tales, we have to look at ourselves as if we have gone free from the clutches of the Egyptians. We have gone free from the inertia of Egypt. We have gone free from the impurities of that nation that enslaved us for 210 years of misery. We have gone free. How do we go free? How do we show ourselves, our family, the world, how do we show that we are b'nei chor and we are free? Because our body, our minds, our hearts, our souls are in tune with one another, and we are being drawn after the Ratzain, doing the will and the bidding of the Ribbono Shel Olam. When a person lives like that, there's nothing that is holding them down. They are free to engage in the greatest simcha of life, which is simchas hanefesh, the joy of the soul, when it is niskarev, when it gets closer and closer to Hashem. I want to leave you off with one last story over here. Fascinating tale. The night of the Seder, we have the luxury. We sit at our Seder table. We have all the trimmings. We have dozens and dozens of pounds of shmura matzah. We have the finest rack of meat, of roast. We have chicken soup with knedlach that are even soft and not hard. We have it all in our houses. We have candy that's kosher Pesach. We have soda that's kosher Pesach. We have the finest silverware, china, crystal on the table. We've got it all. But listen to a story of a person who seemed to have nothing, but he had everything. In Russia, under the communist regime, of course, one of the things that bothered them the most were the Jews that tried to keep Yiddishkeit, to keep mitzvahs. And there was a person who lived there in Russia, whose name was Shaul, and his mission in life was to share the beauty of Yiddishkeit with his fellow brethren who didn't know as much as he did, who were not as brave and courageous as he was. And therefore he tried at every chance that he had, teach a class, bring them in for a Yom Tiv, show them what a Shabbos is all about. And of course the KGB was not very keen on people like this. And they were watching over him like a hawk, trying to find out when he would make that one grave error that they would be able to snatch him away and send him off to the tundra of Siberia. And so, sure enough, one day it happened, he caught too much attention in the eyes of the authority, and they snatched him away, and they told him, we're taking you now to Siberia, you are finished. He had just enough time to go to his house and take his belongings that he needed. Now, most people going to Siberia, they take extra sweaters, extra socks, extra pants. It's freezing there. He was only concerned about a few things. He grabbed his tefillin, and he grabbed his talis, and he grabbed a few pages of some svarim from different svarim books that he had, that he said, I'm going to go there, I'm going to learn, I'm going to teach the Jews in Siberia, we will not abandon our faith. And sure enough, he got there, and he meets the other Jews that are there, and little by little he begins forming groups. They learn a little bit, they daven a little bit. He says, come put on tefillin. Let's try to keep Shabbos the best that we can. and he would take his pages of precious svarim of holy books, and he would learn himself, and he would teach as much as was humanly possible. Well, the guards in Siberia were getting extremely annoyed with this man. You don't come to Siberia to become a Kirov expert of the lost souls of the Jewish people. You go to Siberia to freeze to death and to drown in your misery over your lot in life. So they decided a new plan. Instead of keeping him in Siberia, which was a luxurious place because there were other Jews around, he could have some freedom, they were going to send him off to a place that was even worse, where there would a prison where there would not be a single Jew around, and this man would be all by himself, and that's the way they decided they're going to break the spirit of Shaul. And sure enough, one day, they grab him, and they throw him into the back of a black prison transport vehicle, and they schlep him, and they drive him down, and he realizes he has nothing, no tefillin, no talis, no svarim, nothing. And he gets to this new prison cell where he is. And he realizes one thing off the bat. Even though he's far away, and even though there's not many people around, but the conditions are not as bad as it was in Siberia. So he begins looking for Jews. And he finds there's not a single Jew there besides him. And now he's all by himself. He has none of his religious articles. He has no svarim to learn. And he has not even one Jew to talk to schmooze with, to strengthen and inspire. But he decides that a Jew is never, ever alone. And even in this dark, far-flung place in Russia, where he's away from every single vestige of life that he once knew, he knows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with him. And therefore he decides that the way that he's going to stay attached to Hashem, he's going to try to do the mitzvahs as best as possible. So he begins to draft a calendar. He knew when the day was that he was taken captive. And so he begins making a calendar, and he goes through all of the days of the week so that every Shabbos he would know no work. And he was calculating in his mind all the holidays. And he calculates Sukkot, he calculates Purim, he calculates Pesach, he calculates Shavuos, he calculates them all in the calendar. And now as he's going through the calendar, he's getting closer and closer to Pesach. And he asks himself, how in the world am I going to celebrate Pesach over here? There's no matzah. How am I going to get matzahs to eat on the night of the Seder? And he came up with a plan. There was a fellow prisoner over there who was a non-Jew. His name was Vladimir. And they were very friendly with each other. And he's told Vladimir the following: listen, I'm going to give you my rations of bread. I'm even willing to give you extra fruits, vegetables, whatever you had, beans and the like. But you have to do one thing. You have to help me procure a wheat, and we have to grind the flour, and I'll need a little bit of help, maybe constructing some kind of an oven with fire. I need to bake holy wafers for my holiday coming up. So Vladimir said, wait, I get extra food, all I have to do is help you grind the flour? It's a deal. And so for the next month or so, Shaul is giving him his extra food, his rations, and Vladimir is very happy. And somehow in this desolate place, he managed, derech nes, a miracle, to procure some wheat. And they found some way to grind it together. They ground the flour. And then he made some makeshift oven. And when nobody was paying any attention, he lit a fire in that oven and he baked himself matzahs for the Seder. Now you can imagine this man is there in this prison, somewhere in the middle of nowhere of Russia, freezing cold, all by himself, not a yarmulke, nothing to his name. But it's a Seder night. And he was moiser nefesh, he self-sacrificed, and he got the matzah. He said that when he made the bracha, al achilas matzah, on the eating of the matzah that night, he could not control the tears. That there he was under the nose of all of his enemies, he was privileged to eat a piece of matzah at the Seder. And that night, as he was there, he was davening and praying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, as you brought salvation and freedom to the Jewish people, bring me salvation as well. And sure enough, a miracle of miracles, several months later after Pesach, he gets the call up, and for one reason or another, unexplained to him, they said, you're free, you're going home. And they put him on a transport and they bring him back to his hometown. And the man is excited beyond belief, and he has his calendar. And he's looking at his calendar and he realized it's right before Rosh Chodesh, which is the Rosh Chodesh before Elul. And there's a great custom that many have to do what's called Yom Kippur Katan, a special prayer service. And he begins walking around the town and saying, can we get a minyan together for Yom Kippur Katan? And people are like, what are you talking about? He's saying Rosh Chodesh Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul. They said Rosh Chodesh Elul. What are you talking about? It's Rosh Chodesh Av right now. We don't say Yom Kippur Katan, Rosh Chodesh Av. And at that moment, it dawned on Shaul that although he kept a calendar and he was exact in everything that he did, he made a mistake. It was a year where there were 2 months of Adar. And therefore, the month that he thought was Pesach was really the second month of Adar. And at that moment, he realized that the month that was really Pesach, he was busy eating chametz. And this idea that he made such a mistake, and that on Pesach he ate matzah, even though he had to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgive him, it brought him no end of pain and consternation that he did such a thing. Eventually, he was able to escape Russia, and he made his way to America, and he became a chassid in America of a certain Rebbe, the Rebbe of Stolin. And he came to the Stolen Rebbe and he began telling him his tale and everything which took place. And as he was telling him the story of eating chametz that year on Pesach, he began crying his eyes out. And as he was crying, the Rebbe told him, it's okay. The Torah tells us, Ushmartem es hamatzos. You must guard the matzos. You must guard the matzah. But Chazal say over there, Al tikre matzos. Don't read it as you should guard the matzos. Rather, you should guard the mitzvahs. Guard the commandments that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us. And he said, what do? Just like we're so careful with the matzah. As we know, it can't last more than 18 minutes before it's baked. We have to keep the water away from it to make sure that it doesn't become chametz. Every single mitzvah that a person has, we have to guard it. We have to be quick. We have to make sure that we're doing it to the best of our abilities. And he told him the following. He said, it's true. You stumbled in the eating of the matzah. You made a mistake. It's true. But your love and your appreciation of the mitzvahs that you had, you excelled. You never delayed. You never tarried. Instead, you performed every single mitzvah as best as you were able to. He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu appreciates your sacrifice. You risked your life in the camps over there in Siberia when you're all by yourself. He said, I give you my word that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepted your attempt as a chashiv, a korban, as a sacrifice before him, which is as valuable as any mitzvah that you will perform. You have nothing to worry about, Shaul. Your reward is going to be very great. Shaul was very touched by the words of the Rebbe. And he said, Rebbe, could you please write those words down on a piece of paper for me? And the Rebbe writes down, Ushmartem es hamatzos, meaning guard the mitzvahs. And Shaul carried this paper around with him for the rest of his life, because he felt that this was his tikkun, this was the way in which he would prove to the Ribbono Shel Olam that he had such a strong and burning desire to do his will. He made a mistake in the calendar. But his main purpose in life was to guard the mitzvahs as best as he could. And shortly before he passed away, he called his children to his side. And he pulled out this paper and he said, when I will die, I want you to make sure that you place this in my caver, in my grave together with me. Why? Put it under my head, because it will be the perfect passport that I need to get into Gan Eden, into the Garden of Eden. The mitzvahs are our passport to Judaism. The mitzvahs are the yesod, the foundation of what it means to be a yid. The more that a person does in the world of mitzvahs, the more they draw their heart, their soul, their mind, the ruach of kedusha in their lives, and we are inspired and we're elevated in what it means, the precious gift of Klal Yisrael, of Yiddishkeit. The night of the Seder is the true night of freedom. Every single mitzvah that a person does on that night, count them up, all 64. Every one step closer to Nachas Ruach, one step closer to Kedusha, one step closer to breaking off the shackles of our bodies, of the impurities of this world, and basking in the glory of his skarvus, of closeness to the Ribbono Shel Olam. May we walk into the Seder as one person, and may we emerge as somebody different altogether, someone who appreciates this great gift and this chus and this merit that HaKadosh Baruch has given us to be the Am HaNivchar, the chosen nation, the Mamleches Kohanim, the nation of kings. We are kings, we are free. We are free because we are free to allow our neshamas to do the greatest activities in the world, which is the Ratzon Akel Baruch Hu, the Ratzon, the will of Hashem, which will elevate the Ruach of Kedusha, of holiness and sanctity, and bring us the greatest happiness, the greatest joy, the most internal peace and nachas ruach that a person could ever dream of. Our ticket to a lifetime of working towards the passport of Gan Eden. To everyone, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu rescued the Jewish people from the clutches of the Mitzrim on the night of the Seder, the night of Pesach. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu rescue us wherever we are, whatever we're going through, and bring us singing and dancing with Kedusha and Tahara and Nachas Ruach to the ultimate Geula, the ultimate redemption, the Bias Goyal Tzedek, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, Bimheira U'Yameinu.
Shukran, Rabbi. Thank you.
Amen.